Fear. It's a shadow that lurks in the corners of our minds, whispering doubts and holding us back from the life we long to live. Self-doubt. It's the voice that questions your every step, your every decision, leaving you frozen on the edge of what could be. Together, they form an invisible prison, one that keeps us from reaching our fullest potential. But what if I told you this fear is not your master? Self-doubt does not define you. These words are not mine. They come from a man who faced his own fears, his own doubts, and emerged stronger. Not through sheer willpower, but through wisdom that transcends time. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue. That the testing point, courage, he believed, isn't just for the brave, it's for the doubting, the fearful, and the weary. It's for you." Think about this for a moment. How many times have you let fear or self-doubt steer the wheel of your life? Perhaps it was the dream job you didn't apply for, the truth you were too scared to speak, or the risk you convinced yourself wasn't worth taking. And yet, deep down, you felt the ache of what if? What if you had taken that step? What if you had believed you were enough? C.S. Lewis knew that ache well. He once described fear as a fog, a thick, choking mist that distorts reality and hides the truth. But Lewis also knew something else. Fog doesn't last forever. The sun burns through it, revealing the landscape you couldn't see before. And just like the sun, there's a light within you, waiting to pierce through the fog of fear and self-doubt. Imagine this, a young C.S. Lewis, uncertain of his future, riddled with doubts about his abilities and his worth. He wasn't always the celebrated author and thinker we know today. He wrestled with feelings of inadequacy, wondering if his life had any real significance. And yet, those very struggles became the foundation of his wisdom. Wisdom that has guided millions through their own storms. If you've ever felt trapped by fear or silenced by self-doubt, you're not alone. Lewis reminds us that these struggles are not the end of the story, they are the beginning. Fear and doubt are not enemies to be eradicated, but challenges to be understood. They are the chisels that shape us, the fires that refine us, and ultimately, the pathways to a deeper, more resilient courage. So, let me ask you, what would your life look like if fear no longer held you captive? What could you achieve if self-doubt didn't chain your potential? This isn't just about imagining a different future. It's about choosing to step into it, one courageous moment at a time. Get on the horse first. Forgive yourself and then replace it. It will all change. And here's the truth. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. Lewis teaches us that the first step toward courage begins not with self-assurance, but with faith. Faith that you are more than your fears. Faith that your doubts are not insurmountable walls, but stepping stones to something greater. Courage, Lewis believed, is not a single grand act, but a series of small, intentional steps. Yet, for many of us, the first step can feel like the most daunting. Fear has a way of disguising itself as rational caution, whispering, "What if you fail?" Or, "You're not ready yet." Self-doubt echoes the same refrain, turning even the most capable among us into hesitant bystanders in our own lives. But let's pause here for a moment. What if the question isn't, "What if I fail?" but instead, "What if I don't even try?" What if the real failure is allowing fear to dictate the boundaries of your life? Take, for example, the story of Rosa Parks. Her courage wasn't loud or theatrical. It was quiet, firm, and resolute, a simple refusal to give up her seat. Yet that small act, fueled by a deep sense of purpose, became the spark that ignited a movement. Imagine if Parks had allowed fear or self-doubt to silence her. The ripples of her courage remind us that even our smallest actions, when rooted in conviction, can create waves of change. But perhaps you're thinking, that's Rosa Parks. She was extraordinary. And yes, she was. But extraordinary people often begin as ordinary individuals, just like you and me, facing the same fears and uncertainties. What sets them apart is not the absence of fear, but their decision to act in spite of it. Lewis understood this intimately. In the early days of his career, he was plagued by doubts about his ability to make a meaningful contribution to the world of literature and theology. He questioned whether his ideas would resonate, whether he had anything truly valuable to say. And yet, he pressed on. He once wrote, "Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." It was through his willingness to face those doubts head-on that he found his voice, a voice that would go on to inspire generations. Now let's look at a more personal example, something many of us can relate to. Imagine a young musician, terrified of performing in front of a crowd. Each time she steps onto the stage, her heart races, and her mind is flooded with thoughts of all the ways it could go wrong. But instead of succumbing to fear, she reframes it. She tells herself, "This nervousness means I care, and if I care, it's worth doing." That spirit says, "Let my right hand restrain my inclination." And if over time what once felt impossible becomes second nature, not because the fear disappears, but because she learns to move through it. This is the essence of Lewis's wisdom. Fear and self-doubt are not barriers to be avoided, but companions to be understood. He saw them as opportunities to grow in courage, resilience, and faith. And history is filled with examples of people who embraced this mindset. Consider Thomas Edison, who famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 1,000,000 ways that won't work." His journey to invent the light bulb was riddled with setbacks and skepticism. Yet each failure brought him one step closer to success. What fueled Edison's perseverance was not an absence of doubt, but a refusal to let doubt have the final say. Let's bring this closer to home. Think about your own life. Perhaps you've faced a moment when fear tried to talk you out of something you deeply wanted. Maybe it was starting a new job, having a difficult conversation, or pursuing a dream that felt just out of reach. What if, in that moment, you had chosen courage over comfort? What if you had taken just one step forward, even if it was a small one? Lewis believes that these small steps are where transformation begins. He once said, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." It's a reminder that the power to overcome fear and self-doubt isn't found in grand gestures, but in the quiet decision to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Now let's delve deeper into the nature of self-doubt. At its core, self-doubt thrives on comparison. We look at others, at their successes, their talents, their seemingly perfect lives, and we convince ourselves that we don't measure up. But Lewis challenges this mindset. He reminds us that our worth isn't determined by how we compare to others, but by who we are in the eyes of God. Humility, he wrote, is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. True humility doesn't diminish our value. It frees us from the trap of self-absorption, allowing us to see our unique gifts and purpose more clearly. End of poem. And here's where the shift happens. When we stop fixating on what we lack and start focusing on what we can give, fear and self-doubt lose their grip. Instead of asking, "Am I good enough?" we begin to ask, "How can I use what I have to make a difference?" This shift in perspective is not only liberating, it's transformative. Think about Florence Nightingale, the founder of modern nursing. She could have let fear and doubt deter her from her calling. After all, she was a woman in a male-dominated society, stepping into a field riddled with challenges. But she didn't let that stop her. Instead, she focused on the needs of others, and in doing so, she revolutionized healthcare. Nightingale's story reminds us that when we step out in faith, not for ourselves, but for a greater purpose, we tap into a wellspring of courage that can carry us through even the darkest moments. What a treasure, added Nightingale. What a treasure. So, what does this mean for you? It means that overcoming fear and self-doubt isn't about waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect version of yourself. It's about starting right where you are, with all your imperfections and uncertainties, and taking that first step. Picture this: a young C.S. Lewis sitting at his desk staring at a blank page. Doubts swirl in his mind. Is this worth writing? Will anyone even care? But he picks up his pen and begins. And that small, seemingly insignificant act of courage, it sets in motion a legacy that continues to inspire millions. What does success mean to C.S. Lewis? Now I ask you, what's your blank page? What's the one step you can take today to push past fear and self-doubt? Because here's the truth. Courage isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose. And as Lewis teaches us, when you take that step, however small, you're not just conquering fear. You're stepping into the fullness of who you were created to be. But here's the question that keeps us up at night. What if I fail? What if fear gets the better of me? What if self-doubt is right and I'm not enough? These are the whispers that hold us back, keeping us frozen in place. But C.S. Lewis would argue that these very questions hold the key to transformation. Why? Because the willingness to wrestle with fear and doubt is what leads us to clarity, growth, and purpose. Let me tell you about an artist named Vincent van Gogh. He's celebrated today as one of history's greatest painters, but in his lifetime, he sold only one painting. Just one. Can you imagine the doubt he must have faced? The nights he spent questioning if his work had any value? And yet, despite the overwhelming lack of recognition, he kept painting. Why? Because he believed in the worth of his vision, even when the world didn't. Van Gogh's story reminds us that sometimes courage is simply the act of showing up, of continuing the work, even when the outcome is uncertain. But let's bring this closer to home. Picture a young woman named Sarah sitting in her car outside a job interview. She's gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding, every instinct telling her to drive away. What if they think I'm not qualified? What if I embarrass myself? But then, she takes a deep breath and steps out of the car. The interview isn't perfect. She stumbles over her words, her voice shakes. But she shows up. I do it. I found the bottle of wine in my jacket pocket. What if I embarrass myself? But she shows up, and here's the twist. She gets the job. Not because she was flawless, but because she had the courage to try. End of speech by Marilyn Monroe. Stage directions read. This is the essence of Lewis's wisdom. Courage isn't about eliminating fear. It's about moving forward in spite of it. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Lewis believed that our struggles with fear and doubt aren't just obstacles to overcome. They're signposts pointing us towards something deeper. He wrote, "The pain I feel now is the happiness I had before." That's the deal. In other words, the presence of fear and doubt often means we're standing on the edge of something meaningful. Now, let's add a twist to this narrative. What if fear isn't the enemy? What if it's a guide? History is full of stories where fear and uncertainty led to extraordinary breakthroughs. Think about the Apollo 11 mission. When Neil Armstrong and his team set out to land on the moon, fear was an unavoidable companion. The technology was untested, the risks astronomical, and failure could mean death. But they pressed on, not because they were fearless, but because the goal, the dream, of touching the stars was worth the risk. And when Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, it wasn't just a victory for science. It was a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome the impossible. But let's not romanticize this process. Overcoming fear and doubt is messy, uncomfortable, and often lonely. And yet, it's in this discomfort that we find our greatest opportunities for growth. Lewis believed that our struggles are what refine us, much like gold is refined in fire. He wrote, "Hardships prepare ordinary people for extraordinary destinies." The fire doesn't destroy the gold, it purifies it. And in the same way, our challenges don't diminish us. They reveal who we truly are. Imagine a runner training for a marathon. Each step is grueling, each mile a test of endurance. There are moments when they want to quit, when the pain feels unbearable. But they keep going, not because it's easy, but because they've caught a glimpse of what's possible. And when they cross the finish line, the joy they feel isn't just about the accomplishment, it's about the transformation. They're not the same person who started the race. They're not the same person who started the race. They're stronger, more resilient, more alive. Now, let's talk about the role of faith in this journey. Lewis believed that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting in the face of uncertainty. He once wrote, "Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing moods." Faith, in this sense, is like a compass. It doesn't eliminate the storm, but it gives you the direction to navigate through it. Consider the story of Harriet Tubman. As a conductor on the Underground Railroad, she faced unimaginable dangers. She didn't have a detailed map or a guarantee of success. What she had was faith. Faith in her mission, faith in the freedom she was fighting for, and faith in a higher power guiding her steps. Tubman's courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was her unwavering determination to act despite it. But here's the twist that Lewis offers us. Courage isn't just for heroes and historical figures. It's for the everyday moments of our lives, the quiet, unseen battles we fight within ourselves. It's the courage to apologize when we've been wrong, to forgive when we've been hurt, to stand up for what's right, even when it's unpopular. These acts may seem small, but they're the building blocks of a life well lived. Let's circle back to where we started, fear and self-doubt. They're not signs that you're weak or incapable. They're reminders that you're human, stepping into the unknown. And here's the paradox. The very things that scare us are often the things that matter most. They're the things that shape us, challenge us, and ultimately lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. So, what's the takeaway? It's this: fear and doubt are not your enemies. They're your companions on the journey. And as Lewis teaches us, the key is not to avoid them, but to face them with faith, with purpose, and with the quiet, steady courage that comes from knowing you are not alone. Conviction. See the fear and doubt, and you will find the punishment that comes with it. Have conviction. That's the key to the journey. It is the fear and doubt that comes with progress, and with the punishment that comes with it. Refrain from fear, shame, sheer purpose, and with crime. But let me leave you with a question. a mystery to ponder as we continue this journey together. What if the moments you fear the most are the very moments that hold the greatest potential for transformation? What if, like Lewis, you discovered that the fog of fear isn't the end of the story, but the beginning of something extraordinary? Right or Wrong, by Lovecraft's closely held together. The fact that the moments you fear the most are the beginning of something extraordinary. Hold on to that thought, because what comes next may just change the way you see fear and yourself forever. Now imagine standing at the edge of a dense forest. The path ahead is unclear. Shadows stretch long across the ground, and every step forward feels uncertain. That forest represents the fear and doubt we all face. And yet, as C.S. Lewis so often reminds us, it is only by entering that forest that we discover the treasures hidden within it. The question isn't whether the journey will be hard. It will be. The real question is whether we'll summon the courage to take that first step. Constance hesitated. Here's where the story deepens. Lewis believed that fear and self-doubt, though daunting, are actually tools that shape our character. He once wrote, "Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point." In other words, courage isn't just about bravery. It's about the strength to live out our values when it matters most. And the truth is, values are tested most in the moments of greatest uncertainty. Take the story of Abraham Lincoln during the darkest days of the American Civil War. Imagine the pressure he must have faced, the weight of leading a fractured nation. His decisions were met with fierce opposition from all sides. Self-doubt surely crept into his mind. After all, he was a man who had faced repeated failures before becoming president. Failed businesses, failed political campaigns, and even personal tragedies. And yet, Lincoln pressed on, guided by a vision of unity and freedom. His courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the willingness to endure it for the sake of something greater. But this story isn't just about leaders or historical figures. It's about you. Think back to a time in your own life when fear made you hesitate, when doubt whispered, "Maybe this isn't for you." Perhaps it was the first time you spoke up for yourself, or the moment you decided to pursue a dream that felt impossibly far away. Those moments weren't just challenges. They were opportunities. And whether you realized it or not, stepping into those moments changed you. Now let's talk about the role of struggle in this journey. Struggles, Lewis believed, are not obstacles to avoid but teachers to embrace. He once compared life's difficulties to climbing a mountain. The climb is grueling, the air thin, but the view from the top makes it all worthwhile. And here's the paradox. It's the very struggle of the climb that makes the view so breathtaking. Without the effort, the reward wouldn't mean as much. Consider the story of Malala Yousafzai. As a young girl, she faced immense danger simply for speaking out about education for girls. Fear and doubt could have silenced her, but instead they became the fire that fueled her mission. Malala's courage wasn't born from an absence of fear. It was born from a deep conviction that the struggle was worth it. Today, her story inspires millions, reminding us that our greatest impact often comes from the battles we least expect to fight. But let's not stop there. Lewis challenges us to think about the why behind our struggles. What if the difficulties we face are not random but purposeful? What if they're part of a greater narrative, a story being written through our lives? He believed that every challenge is an opportunity to grow in faith, resilience, and wisdom. The great thing, he wrote, is to keep on going. Those words echo with a timeless truth. Persistence transforms pain into purpose. Let's shift the lens for a moment. Imagine a sculptor working on a block of marble. Each strike of the chisel seems harsh, almost destructive. But with every blow, the marble begins to take shape, revealing a masterpiece within. That's how Lewis saw life's struggles, not as meaningless pain, but as the chisel that shapes us into the people we're meant to be. The question isn't why we face challenges, it's how we respond to them. Now, here's a hook to keep you thinking. What if the fear and doubt you're experiencing right now are the very signs that you're on the right path? What if they're not barriers but invitations to grow, to trust, to step into a bigger story? This perspective changes everything. Suddenly, fear isn't the enemy. It's the indicator that you're stepping outside your comfort zone, where real growth happens. Let's explore this idea further with a historical example, the story of Sir Ernest Shackleton and the crew of the Endurance. In 1915, their ship was trapped and eventually destroyed by ice in Antarctica, leaving them stranded in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Shackleton faced a choice: surrender to despair or lead his men through unimaginable challenges. For 2 years, they battled freezing temperatures, starvation, and isolation. Against all odds, Shackleton brought his entire crew home alive. His story is a testament to the power of perseverance and the belief that, even in the bleakest circumstances, there is a way forward. But here's where it gets personal. What does this mean for you? What are the icy waters in your life? The challenges that feel insurmountable? And more importantly, what would it look like to face them with the kind of courage Shackleton displayed? Not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because the effort itself is worthwhile. Lewis believed that this kind of courage is deeply tied to faith. Faith, he said, is not a passive belief, but an active trust, a decision to move forward, even when the path is unclear. It's the faith of someone like Helen Keller, who overcame the darkness of blindness and deafness to inspire the world with her words. Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. One is extremely real to you. Her life reminds us that our limitations don't define us. Our response to them does. See? As we move toward the heart of Lewis's message, let's pause and reflect. What if the struggles we face are not detours but milestones? What if they're the markers of a journey that's shaping us into the people we're meant to become? This perspective doesn't make the struggles easier, but it does give them meaning. And meaning, as Lewis understood, is what turns suffering into strength. So here's the final twist for this part of our journey. What if the forest you're afraid to enter is the very place where your treasure lies? What if the fear you feel is not a sign to turn back, but a call to move forward? Lewis reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. And when we do, we discover that the forest isn't as dark as it seemed, that the path, though difficult, leads to a destination more beautiful than we ever imagined. Hold on to that thought, because the next step in our journey will reveal the treasure that awaits beyond the forest, the transformation that comes when we face our fears and doubts with courage, faith, and purpose. Unlocking the Virtues Within with Courage is the title of the best-selling novel by Robert George. End of footnote. And now, we come to the heart of it all, the moment when the journey through fear and self-doubt reveals its ultimate purpose. If you've walked with me this far, you already know that fear is not the end of the road. It is the threshold, the doorway, the fire through which we are refined. C.S. Lewis believed that transformation doesn't come from avoiding our struggles, but from confronting them. He wrote, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind." This is the promise that lies on the other side of fear, not the absence of challenges, but the clarity and strength to face them with a renewed spirit. Firmness allows us to carry on with courage, I know this because my life revolves around firmness, and when the bitter and consequential things approach, there is always the clarity and strength to face them with a renewed spirit. Picture this: a young man named David, standing before a towering giant named Goliath. The odds are impossible. The fear is real. And yet, David doesn't run. He steps forward, not because he's fearless, but because he believes in something greater than his fear. That single act of courage changes everything. What giants in your life are waiting for you to step forward? What battles could be won, not because you're without fear, but because you choose to face it? Here's the truth: every step you take into the unknown, every moment you rise above self-doubt, you are reshaping your story. You are proving to yourself and the world that you are capable of more than you imagined. And isn't that what life is truly about? Not perfection, not an absence of fear, but progress, growth, and the quiet victories that no one else sees. End of preface. Let's bring it closer to home. Think of a single moment when you overcame something that once terrified you. Maybe it was speaking up in a crowded room. Maybe it was starting over after a failure. Or maybe it was simply choosing to believe in yourself when no one else did. Those moments matter. They're the threads that weave together the tapestry of your life, and each one is a testament to the strength you didn't know you had. So, as we conclude this journey, let me ask you, what's your next step? What's the fear you're ready to face? What's the dream you're ready to pursue? Because the truth is, the world needs more people who are willing to confront their doubts, embrace their challenges, and shine their light into the darkness. At last. This is, and if this message resonates with you, if you've felt a spark of hope, of courage, of possibility, then let's not let it end here. Join this community of seekers and dreamers, of those who believe that C.S. Lewis's wisdom still holds the power to change lives. Subscribe to this channel, share this message, and be part of something bigger than yourself. Together, we can create a ripple effect of courage, faith, and transformation that reaches far beyond what any of us can see. Your journey doesn't end here. In fact, it's only just beginning. Face your fears, trust your faith, and remember, there are far, far better things ahead than any you leave behind. Round the globe in less than half an hour. Civilization comes June 1982.